I've got a fun fact for you. Did you know that most demanding guitar players prefer a glossy nut? Question is, how do you make your nut glossy? Well, come on in a little closer and I'll show you what I'm talking about. But first, get your mind out of the gutter. I'm talking about a guitar nut. Okay, the process for polishing a nut to a high gloss shine involves the use of different grades of sandpaper. And I'll start with 500 grit and work my way all the way up to 2000 grit. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sanding the surface to remove the scratches that were left over from the initial coarse sanding and shaping process when I first made the nut blank. So I'll start with the 500, and basically all I'm going to do is I'm going to sand the top surface and the ends. I'm not going to worry about the face or the back of the nut. And the reason for that is if you're not careful, you can easily remove too much material from either the front or the back of the nut, which will alter your scale length, maybe by only 1/1000th of an inch or so, but that's enough to kind of mess things up and make intonation a challenge. So I typically just avoid the front and the back of the nut and worry only about the top and the sides. And what I'm going to use is all the sandpapers that I'm using here are P-grade sandpapers. And P-grade sandpapers are the highest quality sandpapers that you can use, and they result in better quality finishes. But you can tell it's a P grade obviously because the grit designation will be preceded by the letter P. If it doesn't have that P, it's not a P grade sandpaper. And this all has to do with the standard in which the sandpaper is manufactured to. And I'm not going to get into that in this episode. It would just take too long. But I'll start with the 500, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to sand the surface. And the goal here is to remove the scratches, like I said, that were left over during the initial coarse sanding and shaping process. And to gauge my progress, what I'll do is I'll look at this surface at a low angle against a bright light, and that will help to reveal the scratches. And as I continue to sand, those scratches will gradually disappear. And then for the ends, I'll just give those a quick light sanding. Doesn't take a lot of effort to do this. And you don't want to overdo it because you don't want to make the nut too narrow. I will also address the sharp corners and this sharp edge along the front and back of the top, just the top. And I want to kind of round those over with my sandpaper. And the reason that I want to round those over is it makes the nut a little less obtrusive as you're playing. You don't have those sharp points digging into your fingers when you're playing up around the first fret. Also, by reducing the sharp edge along the top edge, front and back, you reduce the potential for the nut chipping as you're tuning the strings, especially with your wound strings. They have a tendency as they slide back and forth through the slot to grab onto those sharp corners and chip off a piece of the material. So rounding it over ever so slightly will help reduce that. So once I have removed the coarse sanding scratches that were left over from the shaping process earlier, I can then move on and gradually work my way through the grits. After I've finished sanding with 2000 grit, what I typically would do next is I'd head out to my shop, and after a couple of seconds at my high-speed buffing machine, this nut would have a gorgeous high-gloss shine. However, not everybody out there has access to a high-speed buffing machine, but here's an alternative that works just about as well. I call it the denim method. What you do is you take an old pair of blue jeans, lay it out on your table, or your workbench. Then you want to grip the nut firmly and just start polishing away. You want to use a fair amount of force here because you're going to want to generate friction. And you'll know you're generating friction when you can feel the heat. So you just keep going. And it only takes a few minutes. And you can grab the end of it and do the same thing. But what you'll end up with is a pretty decent glossy shine. Not as good as you'll get with a buffing machine, but I think you'll be happy with the results. So, I hope you found this video to be useful. If so, give me a thumbs up, click the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications so that every time I post a new guitar building, guitar repair video, you'll be notified and know it's there and you won't miss anything. And until the next episode, take care, and I'll see you soon.